the band. Thank you. Such a blessing to be here and to share. The first service was filled with people that had bona fide, certified miracles. I'm talking, the doctor said, go home and prepare, and they're sitting there with their grandchildren. The journey that we're on, and today I'm looking around at a group of people that started working out there in the world, building houses for Habitat, working with microloans, taking the love of God to the world. And I want to say to every one of you, what an honor. What a privilege to stand in your frequency and your vibration of love. And since I love you so much, and it'd really be good for me to take the heels off for all of us. I haven't worn closed-toed shoes for 6 years. I still have the hose that I left Overland Park with in 19. You know, you might need them. Oh, well, let me just say aloha. Aloha. And let me just honor this amazing team. I got off a red eye on Pentecost in last June. Flew in from Maui, got to the airport, got a friend to drive me here, and I sat in this community for the first time, just sitting there. I felt the grace and the power and the beauty. I was so blessed until people sent me the photographs of what I looked like. I felt so good it didn't occur to me that maybe that red eye had taken its toll. But Bob, I thank you for inviting me and allowing me to come. And I said in the first service, Bob was the sheriff of Unity Village when I was a student. And he had this marvelous sense of humor, but he had a no-nonsense approach about where students could park. I never got it, you know. You got 150 empty spaces, and they wanted the students, and they said it was to teach me discipline. Oh, it was a little late for that. You know, I arrived in Unity, Jan, I love your story, because I arrived at Unity Village 4 years, clean and sober, and 4 years in Unity. So let's face it, I wasn't tightly wrapped. And I came to this beautiful community, and I had a plan. I was going to go to all the Unity churches and pick the one that was right for me. And right before I left Southern California, which is the only place I'd ever lived, so I didn't have any idea why you would have snow without a ski slope. I just didn't quite grasp it, you know. But when I came to Unity Village, and I saw this sign, and I saw Wichita. Now, I don't even know, except for Wyatt Earp, what Wichita might be, but when I got here, and I was on that freeway, heading to Unity Village, there's that great big sign, and it's still there. What does it say? Wichita. So when I got up that Sunday morning to go to the temple, or go to the village, or go, I went for Wichita. And I walked into that sweet little community down the road. Bob Brummett, what a great teacher he was. And I sat down, and I never saw any other church the full 2 years that I was here. Unity in Overland Park was my home, and I learned and I grew, and we became something so wonderful. So when I say to you, aloha, I want you to say it with me. Aloha. Isn't that a great word? It's a vibration, it's a frequency. Aloha. Hundreds and hundreds of meanings. They're all about love, they're all about connection. Aloha. But do you know that when you speak or sing Hawaiian, every single word ends in a vowel? Ah, ooh, ah. And when they wire up people singing it or listening, don't even have to speak it, don't have a clue what the words mean, you naturally go into theta and beta, this combination of this blissful, peaceful feeling. There's many, many beautiful islands all over the world, but there's very few with that frequency, that vibration of aloha. So let me share what it means. Ah, say that with me. Ah. Doesn't that feel good? Your whole breath, right? Ah means from the very first light, from the very beginning of all time. Lo. Lo doesn't mean for a long time. Lo means forever, throughout all eternity. From the very first light, lo, from all eternity, we share the very breath of the divine. We share the very breath of the love of the infinite. And here's the tagline. Every Hawaiian knows when they say aloha, from the very beginning, forever, we share the breath of God. So, of course, I love you. How swift and bright do you need to be to know the 7 billion people you're sharing this planet with? You're together. For a long time? No, for all of eternity. Would it make sense to get over any issues we seem to have? We seem to have some, don't we? And I know as hard as it seems to be, sometimes they're just as beloved of the infinite. They may not be able to bring it forth yet, but then some of us miss the mark now and then, don't we? Sitting in a free country, sitting in a place, don't we sometimes withhold our love? Don't we sometimes get our opinions going? Aloha. When a Hawaiian says, I love you, do you know what they're saying? I'm happy with you. When you say I love you to that friend, or you say I love you to your partner, do you really mean it cellularly? I'm really happy with you. If you do, turn to somebody and say, aloha, I really love you. And try this, aloha, I'm really happy with you. I'm really happy with you.
I'm really happy with you.
Because God is, you know. There's no God out there. The infinite, that pure crystal light that created you in its image and likeness, it's pleased with you. When Jesus came up out of that river Jordan, and what did the voice say? And it was the voice of the Holy Spirit. We know the voice of the Holy Spirit is the mother. 2,500 years ago, everybody knew the dove was the voice of the mother. It wasn't made up stuff. We kind of got edited out. Women got a little bit edited out. But let me just say it as nicely as I can. We're back. And since we've all been men and women, Ram Dass said to me, Mary, I think you were a man last time. Well, that explains some of the challenges I've had. I didn't quite get the roll down, you know what I mean? We've all been everything, so we can get over a lot of our stuff and we can just breathe into that, right? We've all been everything, and you're going to go on way after this human incarnation, so you don't have to make it as big a deal as sometimes we do. It's sacred, it's holy, it's essential. But the Buddha said it like this. He said, every day you should get up and you should imagine that the entire universe depends on every choice you make. And the next breath you should take a lap and realize what a silly conversation that is. They're both true, aren't they? They're both true. And this is the most important time in human history, so I stand with you. Knowing that that pure, clear, diamond, opalescent light that poured through Jesus Christ pours through you. And it radiates from you. Myrtle Fillmore said it like this, you are meant to be a radiating center, attracting everything you need. Not getting everything you need, attracting everything you need. It's vibrational now, isn't it? That's why aloha is so important. It's a vibration of love. It's a vibration of acceptance. It's a vibration of oneness. In Hawaii, there are two key vibrations. The first is aloha, this great love. The beautiful song that Molly sang, everything is holy now. Everything is sacred now. And the other is lakahi. Say that, lakahi. And you know what lakahi means? Unity. Unity. You know, I went to Dharamsala to be with the Dalai Lama for a couple of months, and I put down on this little form, I said, I'm the unity minister in Maui, and do you know they rushed me through customs, they picked me up in a Dalai Lama car, they put me in this suite, they walked me through security, and I was thinking, wow, now that's how it ought to be. You know, you do that long trip, you know, but basically what it was I was in the hotel that there's 13 rooms. It's where Richard Gere stays. I thought I might get lucky. Actually, I did. I got transferred down, and he and I were the only two people at another place because all of the lamas were coming in. Not at this time, but another time I was there. Every lama in the world was coming in because, you know, the Dalai Lama, they always have a successor to the Dalai Lama and the Pacha Lama. The Chinese took him. You guys know that story? The Chinese took the Pacha Lama, the real one, and they installed their own. And the Dalai Lama says, it doesn't work like that. Some of us do that with consciousness, don't we? We think we can jump. But consciousness evolves. Consciousness we earn. Consciousness we grow in, right? You just can't say, okay, I'll just be the next Dalai Lama. Although he did say it would be helpful if he would come as a woman. I asked him. He said, if that would be helpful, I would come. But he said that era may be over. That era of having that kind of spiritual, it may be over. Because we're waking up, right? Isn't that wonderful? So there I am, just basking in for 3 or 4 weeks, really, wow, this is amazing. These Tibetans are so honoring, so wonderful. And then 13 rooms in this little hotel, and somebody from Maui shows up. I mean, what are the chances? There's only 120,000 people that live on Maui, and one of them shows up in this 13 room. And as they're explaining that the mayor, I don't know, the mayor from Unity, it must be me, right? She said, we don't have a woman mayor. Oh. So being the minister of Unity in Maui suddenly didn't have the same vibration. And lucky for me, I had been gracious and wonderful to all the help, because I soon was relegated to where the help eat and where the help is. And they took me into their homes and they welcomed me, so it turned out to be a glorious thing, truly glorious. So this vibration and frequency that we're talking about, and that's what I want to talk about today, is we live and move. Isn't it what we teach? We live and move and have our being in the pure wisdom, awareness, and power of the divine. Isn't that what we teach? Isn't that the truth? It's in the Bible. There's some other things, but that one is true. You live, move, and have your being in the infinite, limitless good of God. And if you practice and if you get rid of everything, because 100% of spiritual growth, development, and unfoldment is subtraction. There's nothing to add. You've already been created in the image and likeness of wholeness and goodness and infinite itself, right? But you're taking away all the storyline. Lifetimes and lifetimes. In the Upanishads, they call it your vasanas, your tendencies that you're working out. You come in the light of the world, you have all these gifts, and you've got your, what do we call them? Unity calls them your personality. Eckhart Tolle calls it your pain body. Carl Jung called it your shadow. Everybody's got this stuff that we bring in to be transformed, and they talked about it 5,000 years ago in the Upanishads, in the Vedanta teachings, that's the part that you're transforming. You're bringing that down to neutral. So I said to Ramdas, I said, what do you call it? He says, karma, Mary. It's all your karma. Keep it simple. So you're here and you're praying and you're meditating, you're listening and you're doing your affirmations and you're doing your sacred service, and wow, Rachel is an angel. She's really walks her vision and calls you up higher. What a joy. So we are all this vibration, this frequency of possibility, and everybody has a growing edge. There's nobody you're ever going to meet that don't have things to transform. So don't beat yourself up. This is about learning to love yourself as you walk through it, as you neutralize those patterns. You come into a human incarnation, you are the Christ, and you got that other stuff. How many have discovered that? You've been praying for a while. You've been forgiving for a while, and then something so extraordinarily harsh or hard happens. And it seems so unfair, doesn't it? But if you stay in that awareness of presence and you watch it and love it into wholeness, not only do you transform those old patterns, your old karma, so that you can walk through any situation as Jesus did. So when they put those nails in his hands, he didn't falter. He knew who he was, and he knew what he came to do. And because he was crucified, because there was a crucifixion, and we all had them, there was a resurrection, There was an ascension, and 2,000 years later, humanity is remembering. Isn't that the truth? Have you ever thought if he hadn't been willing to take that walk? How that story, how many people would never have known the love of God? And I want to say just one thing. Jesus never said, worship me. Not once. You can read that whole New Testament. Not one time did he say, worship me. He said, worship God. Love each other. And follow me. Follow me. Forgive everything. Bless everything. Allow everything to be transformed in your presence. So, now we're getting to my talk. It had to happen. What can I say? I was going to call the talk because I'm on a 3-month tour and I'm going to 14 churches working with boards. And Terry Wilder is going to be singing at my women's retreat, and 2 Sundays from today. Anybody remember Richard Hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Richard Hell, who hired Fred, who put great music on the map in all of Unity, who said, when I told him what I wanted in the music, I said, well, and he said, well, then you got to have a bass, and you got to have a drummer, and you got to have another keyboard, and voila, here you guys are. Fabulous, right? Well, so I'm just going in to do the induction of Reverend Dr. Richard Held. He has served as a year at Unity in Linwood, and they love him. They like me. They love him. I get to come back and do the lead-in, the women's retreat, and then the induction, and they adore him. Isn't that amazing, sitting here in this room? We've got the poet laureate of Kansas sitting here. Stand up. She's humble, but you deserve that. And there's so much talent in this sanctuary today. So many people working that email me, write me letters that are changing the food in the hospitals, that are working with microloans all over the world. I mean, there's so much good work sitting here. Well, I was going to call the talk Undreamed of Possibilities. Undreamed of Possibilities. This walk with Spirit wasn't easy. It's not that there aren't challenges. People I love do die. People I love find other people to love. Those hurt. It might bend me to my knees, but there's a power in me. There's a power in you that's greater. And so my son said, no, Mom, you can't, this is my Hanai son, you can't call it Undreamed of Possibilities because the talk that changed my life was Apocatastasis. Something wonderful is happening right here. Apocatastasis, something, what, they have clubs all around the Unity churches. Just they got my little cassette and they listen to it. It's really from Jack Boland. Now, say the word because it's a real word, Apocatastasis.
Apocatastasis.
My son has a business. It's a multi-million-dollar business now. Apocast. It has a 37% total remission rate of cancer in dogs, 85% health and well-being. And it's going global. And the National Health Science of that organization just gave them money to test it on humans. Apo, it tells your cancer cells to die. Cancer is the problem with the cell. They don't stay in flow, right? They don't do what they're supposed to do. So apocatastasis is a word that's used in biology, it's used in physiology, it's used in sociology, and it describes the process. And I'm going to give you an example and you'll get it instantly. And this is with people and groups, this is with your body, and the word apocatastasis. So I'm sitting here and they tell me something like 2-3 trillion cells. Do we have a scientist here? Lots of cells in your body. And while you're sitting here, they're doing all kinds of things that are working for you. Anybody have to stop and say, oh, I better breathe. Oh yeah, and keep that air conditioning coming because I forgot to sweat and get everything moving out of my body, right? Your trillions of cells are doing what they're supposed to do. But let's just say I'm sitting here and accidentally I cut my finger. Well, those millions and millions of cells that are all in that area, they don't say, oh my God, we can't let her ever have a knife again. I better get to therapy. I better call my parent. No, you're immediately, those cells, immediately, faster than we can measure, stop what they were doing perfectly and begin to disinfect the area, begin to clot the blood, begin to knit together the wound. apocatastasis. There's an optimal response to every situation. And when you are prayed up, when you're cleared, when you've released all those patterns and programs, the vasana, the pain body is no longer running your life, when things happen, you just naturally flow. And that is apocatastasis. Something wonderful is happening right now. Apocatastasis. So the first time I heard that word, I was just left school because I was thinking about Jan. And they actually offered me Overland Park when I was a student here, and it was way too big. I mean, really, there was 150, 170 people, way too big. And some of you are sitting here, it was way too big. And I told you the truth, I wasn't tightly wrapped, so it was a good thing. It was a really good thing. And so I went and I got the privilege of studying with Jack Boland, who at the time had the largest unity church. And he used to take people, I mean, off the streets. And he brought them into these programs, put in a transformative system, and within 3 and 4 years, they were full and healthy and living and remarkable lives. I watched it. So I go there to do an internship, and because there's 2,000 members, there was a lot of counseling and a lot of people, and so a woman came in, and I told the first congregation here at 9 o'clock, which is much quieter than you guys. I don't know what it is, Bob. These guys slept in, or they're still, they're still from last night partying. So that could be true too. So I come in, this woman comes in, and I can't remember all of the things, but she'd lost her job, her boyfriend had left her, she was getting evicted. It was, I mean, I remember thinking she's like one dog and truck away from a really good country western song. I was probably more different than that, because I started walking around like holy, and it was way too big for me. So I took her to the master teacher, Jack Boland. And if you ever saw Jack Boland, he's about 6'2", and he had a way of looking right at you. And he'd look right at you, and he'd call out your very best. And so this woman came in, and she told him the story, and she added things she hadn't even told me. And she's teary-eyed, and she looks at this woman, and she's about my height, at 6'2", and he walks over, and he puts his hand on her, and he looks right at her. And he goes, apocatastasis. Something wonderful is happening right now. And that little pastoral heart went, what? Where's the what? And so when she walked out, she actually walked out feeling pretty good. And afterwards I said, Jack, and I started my convention, and he goes, Mary Omwake, where is your faith? Is your faith in her drama, or is your faith in her God power in her? Whoa. See, he had a way. Apocatastasis is the faith that God is active in every walk you have in your life. Every single moment of your life. Apocatastasis, something wonderful is happening right now. In the midst of those difficulties, it was the Apostle Paul that said, in whatever circumstance I am, I count it joy. Remember that? He was in a Roman prison, and that was not your minimal security TV air conditioning unit. They were really pretty awful. And when he was in that situation, he said, I count it all joy because there's a power, a presence. I've made contact. And as you and I make contact with that infinite, pure, clear light that raised up Christ Jesus from the dead, it makes contact with it. It becomes our life. Apocatastasis is about a vibration, about staying awake and staying aware in all of the circumstances. It comes from a children's story, The Princess of Serendip. The Princess of Serendip is this kind of a saga that was told to children who grew up in what is now Sri Lanka. And it's really a much better version than some of our fairy tales. Some of those are pretty grim, aren't they? Really not very inspiring, not very, wow. Well, here's what the Princess of Serendip, they were always having adventures. They were always going right up where it looked like there was absolutely no hope. I mean, this was it. And then apocatastasis, something wonderful would happen. Right in the midst, maybe several years later, but something wonderful would happen. Here's what the Princess of Serendip knew as children. Think about telling our children this, because it's absolutely true. The first thing the Princess of Serendip knew is they were totally loved and of noble birth. Unless you're reading a different Judeo-Christian Bible than I am, you are of noble birth and you are infinitely loved. The second thing that they knew is that their mother and father were the king and queen. They had all the power, and the infinite in you has all the power to provide for you, to protect you, and right in that moment. And the third thing they knew, and I hope you know this, because I did know this. I didn't know the first two, but I knew this. Growing up, I knew life was meant to be an adventure. I didn't know about human incarnations. I didn't know any of that, but I knew there was a world and I wanted to be a part of it. And you know what? This is the most sacred, most exciting, most powerful time in human history. We're in a whole system change. You turned on the news lately? A whole system change, 7 billion people. But we're seeing the news of a few extremists, and I'm talking on all levels. I'm talking on all levels. We fit in there too. Talking on all levels. We're seeing a few, but you look around and see there's more people waking up on the planet today than in the history of the world. The internet, you put on, Deepak Chopra just did a global meditation, 1 million people. Michael Beckwith went to Sri Lanka, 1 million people in Sri Lanka in 24 hours of prayer. All over the world, people are realizing where's the power? And the power is love. The power is in the choice. The power is in the decision that we make. And you may be the only gospel anyone ever sees. Your life lived full out may be the only possibility people see that it could be different. But once you get and make the decision, isn't that what the song said? Once you make the decision, Apocatastasis is something wonderful as at work. So these princes of Serendip, they're out with some salt. He loses everything. Anybody here lost everything? Maybe it's a relationship, a business, a betrayal, lost everything. And the princess said to him, right in the moment of his despair, Apocatastasis, something wonderful is happening. And that sultan lost everything, went back up from the ocean, the river, where his home had been just totally wiped away. He had no financial resources. He was wiped out. But what the princess of Serendip pointed out to him was Apocatastasis. Something wonderful is happening. And he picked himself up and he went with the townspeople that had helped him, and he dug his own foundations. I mean, he was rich. He never built anything in his life. He was digging his own foundations and hit the largest agate mine in the history of the world. When the princess of Serendip came back, he had more money, and everybody in the entire area had been blessed. The roads had been paved, flowers and trees had been planted, schools were made, because as he harvested his good, he shared it. And the Sultan said to the princes of Serendip, if you had not called me at that moment, Apocatastasis, something wonderful is happening, I wouldn't have found that resolve, that courage to start out again. Because here's what the princess of Serendip, the tagline is. You know that tagline? Aloha, I love you, I'm happy with you. The tagline, until tomorrow becomes today. Most people will never see the good fortune that lies in the unfortunate circumstances. Until tomorrow becomes today, you will not realize the gift that you were given. You're an eternal being. You have lessons to learn and gifts to give, and the world needs them all now. And it needs you to stand in the midst of chaos and say, Apocatastasis, something wonderful is happening right now. Because the power and the presence of the infinite, when Jesus was on that cross, Apocatastasis, something wonderful is happening. There is no resurrection, there is no ascension, and there is no awakening humanity without him being willing to walk the walk he was willing to walk. And you have a walk so noble, so precious. So at Jack Rowland, when I went to that first church, and I went in, and they had 2,000 members, 60, 70 groups every single week. So the most important and busiest room in the whole church was the copying center. Every day, the leaders of those groups came in and Xeroxed their folders, Xeroxed their work. And there, and I have to tell you, it set the standard for what we got here, because I saw excellence. They had flocked wallpaper in the copying room. Custom-made, beautiful cabinetry. And right over the copy machine, where every week people stood with Xeroxing their things, was an oil painting. And that oil painting had a beautiful, big Cadillac and a guy in a 10-gallon hat and acres that looked like of cattle. And in the back, some little black something. And on the bottom it said, thank you, Jack, for making my dreams come true. The man who gave that painting and gave millions of dollars to church today had been a vice president of General Motors. He had helped Jack Boland take a church from 40 to over 2,000 people. He had done all of that, and when he and Jack were prayer partners, he realized that he didn't want to live in Detroit running General Motors. All his life, he'd want to have a cattle ranch. All his life, he'd wanted to be a cattleman. And so it was that he sold everything. He left the board of church today. He went to Oklahoma. This is a true story. He bought thousands of acres. He built a house, and he had enough money left to invest in his herd of cattle and to drill for water. He used every dime he had, and there was no water on that land. And every time he would call Jack Boland and say, Jack, I'm running out of water, Jack would say, Apocatastasis, something wonderful is happening right now. And he'd go back and they'd drill more wells. He finally took a loan on his house. He borrowed from every friend he had. And every time they drilled, there was no water. And every time he called Jack Boland, what did Jack say?
Apocatastasis.
Oh no, he said apocatastasis. Let's see, it's a vibration. Remember? You heard the secret, right? It's all vibration now. Apocatastasis, something wonderful is happening right now. He got down and put a loan on the house. He was down, he had enough money left to make 3 more drills. He drilled once, no water. He drilled twice, and he called Jack, and Jack said,
Apocatastasis.
something wonderful is happening right now. Otherwise, it's just natural. Something wonderful, you got to sell early. And on the last drill, with all the money, and the next one would be the bank would own the farm, right? He struck the largest oil well in Oklahoma at that time. I don't know what's going on in your life right now, but I know what's going on in the world. And it needs you to be able to stand in that light and bring forth the truth. Something wonderful is happening. We've been waiting for eons. We've been told the truth since the Sanskrit told us in the Upanishads that we are emanations of the self-existent one. Unity's been carrying the message. Something wonderful is happening. The world is waking up, and it needs you to stay in that vibrational frequency and not be part of but in that vibrational frequency that says whatever it looks like, there's a power and a presence, something wonderful is happening. And I'm going to say this about Unity Church of Overland Park. With all the babies being born, something wonderful